Good morning. I'm Amanda Pyburn, a member of this fellowship and your service leader this morning. The UU Fellowship of the Emerald Coast is a religious community united by UU principles, which are on the back of your order of service, and committed to service, spiritual growth, and caring fellowship. If you're visiting today, you'll find more information about us in your order of service, on our website, and our Facebook page. Please fill out a visitor card in the front hallway so we can connect with you and send you information about upcoming events. We have a very long name, Unitarian Universalist, for a reason. We used to be two separate denominations. The Unitarians came from a liberal theological background, stressing not creed but religious integrity, freedom to be true to our own search for meaning. Universalists stress expansive love that excludes no one. In May of 1961, the two denominations merged. Together, we find value in most sacred texts and all of humankind's life-affirming religious aspirations. There are some pretty cool announcements that I just saw in your order of service. You'll have to take a look. We have a new office administrator, a new religious exploration assistant, a new AV tech person, a lot of people starting in November. So that's exciting. We are moving on. Be sure you read about the congregational meeting coming up next week. Super important to have enough people here for a quorum so we can vote for our new leaders. After the service, we have a brief time for refreshments and conversation, and then second hour small discussion groups begin. They are also listed in your order of service. There's been a change of leaders, but not a change of topics or rooms. One of our leaders had to go home sick, so we still will have extra in the library, but Josh Ashley will be leading it. Porch Swing to discuss the sermon will still be in the front, but it will be led by Alex Faulkner. So thank you for those guys for switching up at the last minute there. The prelude prepares us for the service. Julian is going to light our chalice for us. We light this chalice today as a people dedicated to personal growth. May it burn away the oppressions we have been taught and glow instead with the humility of learning. May it reignite our dreams for a better world and kindle our joy for simple living. May its warmth bring us home to love, to welcoming, and to all the challenges, the questions, and the blessings of this beautiful path to becoming a beloved community. Please stand as you're able for our opening hymn, which is in the old gray hymnal, the fat one. Or if you don't need to read the music, yes, the words are up here. It's touch the earth, reach the sky. time for all ages, if the kids will come up. I bet you know a lot of rules, right? There are rules at school, there are rules at home, there are rules for grown-ups, rules for driving, rules in our community. There is no end to rules. Can you break the rules? Are you supposed to? Well, that's what this story is about. It's called Library Lion. And as you listen, I want you to think about whether or not it's sometimes okay to break rules. One day, a lion came to the library. He walked right past the circulation desk where you check out the books and into the stacks, the bookshelves. That would be pretty surprising. Mr. McBee ran down the hall to the head librarian's office. "Miss Merriweather," he called. "No running," said Miss Merriweather without looking up. That is a rule in buildings, isn't it? "But there's a lion," said Mr. McBee, "in the library." "Is he breaking any rules?" asked Miss Merriweather. She was very particular about rule breaking. "Well, no, not really." "Then leave him be." The lion wandered all around the library. He sniffed the card catalog. He rubbed his head against the new book collection. Then he padded over to the story corner and went to sleep. No one was sure what to do. There weren't any rules about lions in libraries. Soon it was time for the story hour. There weren't any rules about lions at story hour either. The story lady seemed a little nervous. I know I would be. But she read out the first book's title in a good, clear voice. The lion looked up, so she kept reading. He stayed for the next story and the story after that. He waited for another story, but the children began to walk away. "Story hour is over," a little girl told him. "It's time to go." The lion looked at the children. He looked at the story lady. He looked at the closed books. Then he roared very loud. "Roar!" Has he broken a rule yet? Are you allowed to roar in libraries? No. Miss Merriweather came striding out of her office. "Who is making that noise?" she demanded. "It's the lion," said Mr. McBee. Miss Merriweather marched right over to him. "If you cannot be quiet, you will have to leave," she said in a stern voice. "Those are the rules." The lion kept on roaring. He sounded sad. The little girl tugged on Miss Merriweather's dress. "If he promises to be quiet, can he come back for story hour tomorrow?" Well, yes. A nice, quiet lion would certainly be welcome at story hour. "Hooray," said the children. So the next day he came back. "You're too early," said Miss Merriweather. "Story hour is not till 3 o'clock. He didn't budge. "Very well, you might as well make yourself useful." So she sent him off to dust the encyclopedias. His tail is a pretty good duster. The next day he was early again. Now, when this book was written, they didn't send texts and emails. If your book was overdue, you didn't turn it back in when you were supposed to, they would mail you an overdue notice. And he could lick all the envelopes. It was quite a stack. Soon the lion began doing things without even being asked. He dusted, he licked, he let small children stand on his back to reach the books on the highest shelves. And then he curled up in the story corner to wait for story hour to begin. Well, as days went on, people started getting used to him. He seemed very well suited for a library. His big padded feet were quiet on the library floor. He made a comfy backrest for the children, and he never roared anymore. What a helpful lion, people said as they patted his head. Mr. McBee was still not happy, though. "We don't need lions. They can't understand rules. They don't belong in a library." One day, after he had done all the chores he could think of, he went to see what else he could do for Miss Merriweather. Look what she's doing. She's standing up trying to reach a book on the very highest shelf, and she stretched, and she reached, and she got up on tiptoe. Can you guess what happened? She fell. "Ouch," she said softly, and she did not get up. "Mr. McBee," she called, but he didn't hear her. "Lion," she said, "go and get Mr. McBee." The lion ran down the hall. First rule broken. He put his paws on the desk, but Mr. McBee was ignoring him. He kind of pointed his nose down the hall to where she was, but he didn't look up. So finally, you can see what he did. Can you make the most giant roar you can? Ready? 1, 2, 3, go. He roared the loudest roar he had ever roared in his life. Mr. McBee gasped. "You are not being quiet," he said. "You have broken the rules." Oh, the lion knew what that meant, and he walked quietly out the door while Mr. McBee hurried down the hall to tell on him. But of course, when he got to Miss Merriweather's office, he saw she was hurt. He called the doctor. Let me skip ahead a little bit here. And you can see now she's got a cast on her arm. She's back. Things are pretty much back to normal, except no lion. After all, he was told he had to leave. He broke the rules. Everybody kept looking for him, waiting for him. They're all kind of sad without him. But he didn't come, day after day. Miss Merriweather started talking in a sad, new voice. "Can I do anything to help you before I go, Miss Merriweather?" Mr. McBee asked her one day. "No, thank you." He frowned as he left. He thought there probably was something he could do, after all. What do you think he's going to do to help her feel better? Get the lion back. But it wasn't easy to find him. He looked all over town. He looked under cars. He looked behind bushes, in backyards, and trash cans, and tree houses. Finally, when he circled back to the library, there he was, looking in the windows. "Hello, lion," said Mr. McBee. "I thought you might like to know there's a new rule at the library. No roaring allowed unless you have a very good reason. Say if you're trying to help a friend who's been hurt, for example." The lion's ears twitched. He turned around, but Mr. McBee was already walking away. The next day, he walked down the hall to Miss Merriweather's office. "What is it, Mr. McBee?" she said in her new sad voice. "I thought you might like to know there's a lion in the library." Miss Merriweather jumped up from her chair and ran down the hall. Mr. McBee smiled. "No running," he called after her. But she didn't listen. Sometimes there was a good reason to break the rules, even in the library. And I bet you can think of times where, most rules are there to keep us safe, right? But sometimes you have to look at that rule and think, "Oh, I think right now I need to break it because that way I can help somebody." One of the things we're going to be talking about this morning is that there's nothing so sacred that we can't question it. We can't think about whether it's right or not and maybe make a change if we have to. Yeah. You got it. That's exactly how my classroom was too. You had to be bleeding or throwing up, and and then you could bother me. So there you go. There is always a time when you might need to change a rule. Thank you for listening. You are invited to briefly share personal events in your life by dropping a pebble into the bowl of water silently We have a responsive reading that is not in your hymnal. It is just up here, and it looks like we do have italics, so I'm going to read the regular print if you will read the italics. And if we read it all, that's okay too. It's called Try to Love the Questions. Have patience with everything unresolved in your heart, and try to love the questions themselves, as if they were locked rooms or books written in a very foreign language. Don't search for the answers which could not be given to you now, because you would not be able to live them. Live the questions now. I brought this little quote today that I made in college because I thought it was cool, but it's really appropriate for today's service. A question is priceless, like a fine pearl. An answer would dissolve it. Rather, it should be admired and polished and given back. So join me in a moment of silent prayer or meditation, and I'll close this with a few words. Or I'll close this up. Just gonna leave it right there. I have made mistakes, and some I've even learned from. I am wiser today than I was yesterday, and hopefully tomorrow I will be even better informed. May I speak from my learning and not from my habit. If I speak from my habit, may I interrupt my words to start again. If I don't know, may I be silent and listen. By Deb Cannon. After our song of dedication, the greeters will take up the offering. Generosity is a spiritual practice. Our fellowship is supported by our pledges and donations. If you're paying your pledge with a check today, if you'll write pledge or the month in the memo line, because we also have a tradition called Share the Plate, where all cash and checks with STP or Share the Plate in the memo line are equally split with a local charity. For the month of October, our Share the Plate recipient is One Hopeful Place in Fort Walton Beach. Their mission is to experience those experiencing homelessness and guide them into permanent housing. Your generosity is so appreciated. Our sermon today was first presented by our shared minister, Ruth Van Lillian, at the Panama City UU Church. The title is Bibles, Religions, and Other Idols.
Can everyone see what I'm holding? Said Dr. Wells, professor of biblical studies at the beginning of our first day of class in the fall of 1984. He lifted up in his hand a somewhat limp, leather-bound book. Embossed on the front of this book in gold are the words, Holy Bible. He said it in a calm, solemn, matter-of-fact tone. He looked around the room. This book is on your reading list for this class, Introduction to the Old Testament. Some students fished around in their backpacks. He smiled slightly, then turned abruptly, walked across the room with a purposeful stride. He jerked the large window up a couple of feet, looked around at us again, and casually tossed the volume out of the fourth floor window of Munger amidst a mixture of startled gasps and stunned silence. Dr. Wells had defenestrated the Bible. This is not Sunday school, and in this class, the Bible is no more holy than any other book. It is a textbook. We will use it to study and learn, and nothing will be too sacred to examine, criticize, embrace, or reject in here. Got it? He nodded meekly, but I'm not sure anybody really understood what he was saying. I heard later that having seen the book fly past his own office window, the dean had gone to speak with Dr. Wells again about endangering students and faculty with his annual object lesson. I remember feeling both frightened and exhilarated by the idea of treating so disrespectfully an object I had been taught to handle with great reverence. We human beings are rather inclined to take items which hold some sentimental or symbolic significance to us and make them into sacred objects, imbuing them with some kind of magical powers. That is to say, we make idols of them. We remove them from the realm of the ordinary and sequester them in the space of that which may not be touched except by gloved hands and cannot be examined or criticized. Some groups have been known to extend such protective adoration to places, buildings, furnishings, artwork, and even people. Bob, would you bring me my water? Our need for idols, for sacred things to worship and lift up beyond the ordinary is powerful indeed, with a long history. And not just things, but also ideas, concepts born of experiences combined with stories and tribal wisdom. Of such were born a variety of systems of thought we now call religions. And yes, a religion can become an idol. Unitarian Universalists acknowledge 6 sources for our living tradition, from which we glean wisdom in our individual and collective free and responsible searches for truth and meaning. They are listed in our hymnals, right after our principles. The 5th source is humanism, teachings which counsel us to heed the guidance of reason and the results of science, and warn us against idolatries of the mind and spirit. Humanism as a movement was getting up a good head of steam about 100 years ago under the leadership of men like Curtis W. Reese and John H. Dietrich. I dug into David Robinson's historical tome, the Unitarians and the Universalists, to refresh my memory on these fellows. Both men had started out as ministers in conservative denominations, but found these traditions personally lacking. As each found their way to the Unitarian Church, they brought with them a deep skepticism for biblical theism and questioned the concept of a free faith that still required a belief in a traditional God figure. Reese preached on his concept of a democratic theology which upset all hierarchy, including that of a deity. Dietrich used his parish in Minneapolis as a locus from which to disseminate his Humanist Pulpit series of publications about a naturalist faith bounded by evolution and science. Why should such an approach to theology and religious thought be so appealing to some a century ago? Well, remember World War I and what came after. Look at the discoveries and the advances of the early 20th century: the airplane, the refrigerator, the theory of relativity, theories of modern psychology, the discovery of penicillin, the discipline of modern genetics. Examine the social upheaval as the industrial age expanded, along with opportunities for education and training. Women finally won the right to vote nationwide, and people of color had more chances for education and employment, though still a long way from full civil rights. Transportation, communication, industrialization led more people to move from the crowded East to the burgeoning Midwest to build their lives. Dietrich and Reese both found eager Unitarian audiences in the Midwest, more open to challenging the status quo and to question the idols of the religious rules of East Coast Unitarianism. What we now take for granted in our UU congregations was very radical then. The idea of challenging the foundation of theism was horrifying to the Unitarian leadership of the late 19th and early 20th centuries. According to historian and former UUA president William F. Schultz, the humanist movement opened the door wide for a movement that sought to construct what Dietrich called a religion without God, shifting the focus of religious faith from divinity to humanity. What does this mean? How can one build a religion around humanity? Humanism promotes the best of humanity for the benefit of humanity. That is to say, the highest human capacity for reason, the use of the scientific method for discovering and developing human ability in order to promote the greatest benefit for all humans and the power and opportunity to develop each person's potential. Any Star Trek fans in the room? All right, me too. Think of the original Star Trek series. I grew up on the reruns, and the old man I married watched them in original production, arguing weekly with his parents to get to see it. Remember Captain James T. Kirk of the Starship Enterprise explaining to various alien races about the human fascination with exploration and our capacity for growth and development. It's all about human achievement and ongoing journey towards scientific, life-affirming expansion, boldly going where no one has gone before. Humanism contributed much to Unitarian Universalism. Our seventh principle about the value of the interdependent web of all existence finds its beginnings with the humanist contention that humans are woven into the fabric of nature and still evolving with it. As we agonize over climate change and take to the streets to protest the destruction of the environment, humanists would say we have the capacity to change and fix things because we are a part of the earth. Further, humanism has lent vital energy to the fight for social justice in every venue. Humanism insists that all life blessings should be available to all people, not just the chosen or the saved or any other elite group. The democratic religion promoted by Rees pushes us right into the fight for every kind of human justice. But nothing's perfect. Schultz also points out in his book, Making the Manifesto, humanism has its limitations. Charles H. Little, a peer of Rees and Dietrich, noted his concern that the movement left an impoverishment of religion through loss of faith in a personal God and in life after death. While many modern humanists have adopted a comfortable atheism and a resignation to oblivion after death, these seemed frightening losses a century ago. And we have a fair number of new UUs wrestling with these elements of faith for whom humanism offers cold comfort. Schultz criticizes humanism for a lack of engagement with the emotions of pain, grief, and loss. There was a sense of one's ability to think and reason one's way through such crises. The Humanist Manifesto declared, "Man will learn to face the crises of life in terms of his knowledge of their naturalness and probability. Reasonable and manly attitudes will be fostered by education and supported by custom." I have to say, as one who identifies as a woman, the development of manly attitudes leaves me unimpressed. Love of intelligent inquiry and scientific method has led some humanists to look disparagingly on spiritual expression. One of the manifesto signers, Oliver Reiser, had captured the essence of this condescending perspective perfectly in a parody of prayer. "Thou cosmic movement, cosmic continuum, we petition thee to lend auditory discrimination to these our laryngeal contractions. May our cortical pathways always keep vigilance over our lower reflexes. May our endocrines not hypertrophy, nor our hormones become toxic. Increase our opsonic index. And though we walk through the valley of depressed metabolism, may we secrete no useless adrenaline." Yes, we can laugh, but maybe we should also furrow our brows. The same free faith that made room for humanism must also make room for other religious expressions. Liberal self-righteousness is as limiting, judgmental, and unwelcoming as any other kind of self-righteousness. What are some of our idols in our UU fellowship? Look for things we repeat over and over, and the change of which we might resist. What if we stopped inviting folk to come forward to share their joys and concerns? What if we removed decorative items hanging on the walls? What if we ended our service by singing, "Exit, rejoice, and go home. Exit, rejoice, and go home. The sermon was not too long today. Exit, rejoice, and go home." Let me say how impressed I am with the willingness to experiment with the arrangement of the room. Such movement of familiar items can cause quite a stirring up of things that could be a little idolized. Unitarian Universalism is a unique religious community where we do exercise a freedom of faith unknown in any other denomination. We do not have to think alike, and we have no required creeds. While humans' tribal nature presses our communities at times with judgmental attitudes, we do not all have to march or be Democrats or eschew guns or be vegetarians or love Bob Dylan or the Grateful Dead. And we do not all have to be humanists. We don't all have to like the principles or the sources, and there are plenty of UUs who don't. The same freedom we claim for ourselves, we must extend to each other. Freedom of thought and belief is limited only by its potential to interfere with someone else's freedom. Humanism warns us of making idols out of things or ideas or beliefs. While we may individually and collectively hold sacred many things, let us be wary of idolizing them. We need to be open to discussion, examination, and criticism. Let us hold one another with respect and dignity, and learn from each other with curiosity and openness. Let us learn from many sources of life-affirming wisdom. Let us love much, live mindfully, learn eagerly, and work tirelessly for justice. We have a long journey toward fulfilling our best human potential. Amen. Shalom. Blessed be.
Will be the group you want to join this afternoon or after the service. Please stand as you're able for our final hymn. It is in the new teal hymnal, if you'd like to look at the music, When Our Heart is in a Holy Place. Some came here to be blessed with answers in a tumultuous world. Let us hope, too, however, that many of us have been blessed with questions to direct us with a clarity of mind to steer our logic towards kindness and justice always. Please stay seated for the postlude, then join us for refreshments and conversation in the back, followed by second-hour discussions. Thank you for coming. Thank you for coming. Oh, I'm supposed to chime, that's why. There we go. You're so good, you're trained to wait for the chime, and I didn't do it.